welcome to CTV News. Today we are pleased to be joined by Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield. Chris recently returned from his 5-month mission, commanding Expedition 35 to the International Space Station. During his long journey, Chris performed many important scientific experiments as well as operating Canadarm2. Chris provided us with a new point of view with the many videos he posted over social media while in space. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Ben. It's a pleasure being here. I felt that it was important for my friends on Earth to see the world from my perspective. It was an honor for me to command the International Space Station, just like the previous Canadians who commanded it before me.
Actually, Chris, if you didn't know, you were the first ever Canadian to command the space station. You were also the first ever astronaut to give us a point of view in space. At this time, I would like to open the floor to any questions from the media.
Johnson from Toronto Star. Chris, explain to us the steps you took towards becoming the commander of the International Space Station. Was this your first ever time in space?
Well, after high school, I attended the Royal Military College in Kingston, Ontario, and received a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. Then I went to the University of Waterloo for some postgraduate studies, and then finally attended the University of Tennessee and received the Master of Science in Aviation. My flying experience came from being part of the North American Aerospace Defense Command, also known as NORAD. After serving 25 years in the military, I became Chief of Robotics for NASA in Houston, Texas. My most important experience were my 3 previous expeditions in space. My first was on the International Space Station. I was a mission specialist, and I was the first Canadian to operate Canadarm in orbit. My second flight, I returned to the International Space Station as Specialist 1, installing Canadarm2, the second Canadian-made robotic arm on the station. My final flight was a long-duration space flight lasting 6 months, preparing for my long journey on the ISS.
Joey, Globe and Mail. During your time being the commander of the space station, what were your tasks and objectives?
My objectives were to carry out specific experiments, operate Canadarm2, and perform robotic tasks. As my team and I arrived at the space station, the members of the Expedition 34 were still occupying the station. We helped them capture a capsule with our needed supplies for our next little while. I operated Canadarm2 during this exercise and captured the capsule and brought it into the station. Another one of my major tasks took place a few days before our departure. We found an ammonia leak on the exterior of the station. Tom Mansburn and Chris Cassidy, 2 of my fellow astronauts, suited up in their spacewalking suits and repaired the leak in just less than 3 hours. I gave direction and supervised this operation. During my expedition, I was lead for the Japanese and European models and performed science experiments in regards to the Canadian scientists back on Earth.
Smith, Toronto Sun. Eating, personal hygiene, and sleeping all come natural to us on Earth. You experience 16 sunsets every 24 hours in space. Anything you eat or let out of your body just floats around. What's it like trying to perform these ordinary tasks in space?
Eating in space and what to eat in space takes some special consideration, as we live in a non-gravity environment. Powders and crumbs, if not contained, can contaminate the air and can be harmful to our bodies. Our solution to these problems is to eat sticky foods, such as eggs, stews, and puddings, things that will stick to our utensils. It's a very interesting experience to try to eat food without gravity, but trying to go to the washroom, that's a different story. The washroom is a very small room with a raised bowl where you release your bowels. There are fans that purify the air so you're not breathing in the toxic smells, and there's a vacuum in the toilet that sucks the feces into a waste compartment. It's one of the most challenging aspects of personal hygiene in space. Another challenge is sleeping. As you said earlier, there are many mornings and nights in one day. In space, we follow Greenwich time. We sleep on average 8.5 hours for every 24 hours in a day. There are 2 options for sleeping in space. The first is free floating, and the second, the one that I do, and the most popular one, which is strapping yourself down to the station so you don't float around. As you can tell, it's a completely different way of living in space. You must completely change your way of living when you prepare to go up and live in the space station?
Maxwell, Globe and Mail. Being the first ever Canadian to command the International Space Station is a true inspiration to all Canadians. What effects do you think this huge achievement will have on the future generation of astronauts across Canada?
Well, becoming an astronaut is not an easy career to get into. Everyone needs some sort of inspiration to want to pursue something. For me, when I was younger, I remember watching the Apollo 11 moon landing on television. And from that moment on, I knew that I wanted to be an astronaut. I think my achievement will show all Canadians around the world that anything is possible if you work for it.
Turner, New York Times. Chris, I think the question we all want to ask is, are you going to return to space?
My last space flight was my fourth in my career. I'm 56 years old now, and it's been a long time working. That is going to be my last flight, as I am retiring from the Canadian Space Agency and government services. My retirement officially takes effect on July 3rd, 2013.
I would like to thank you all for coming, and that wraps up the questions for today. Another thanks to Chris Hadfield for coming. I'm Ben Larrick, and thank you for watching.